お待たせしました。
Oh my gosh, it's the woman of the hour, Kumasawa. Hello everyone, my name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Umineko When They Cry. I don't know why my dogs decide to throw a conniption fit as soon as I start recording, but they timed it just right this time around. In the last video, we had Erica go into a very childish and somewhat unnecessary fight against Maria, because she was claiming she saw magic with the whole, she bestowed upon her candy out of nowhere trick. And I mean, yeah, you can claim very easily, because Maria closed her eyes, that a trick of some sort could have just been, just a trick of any kind could have happened, really. Whether it's a sleight of hand or, some sort of misconception, a magic trick, if you will. A magic trick is magic until you know exactly how it happened. Or, as somebody pointed out in the comments of the previous video, maybe you don't want to know the actual answer and you want to continue to believe that magic was the answer. Why? I don't know. That's up to the person. Anyways, what's Kumasawa up to?
お風呂に入っておりまして。おや、皆様方は？
入れ替わりですね。ついさっき2階へ上がりました。あなたを呼んだのは私です。何でも悪食島の話や森の魔女の話などにも詳しいとか。
ええ、まあたわいもない話ですが。
たわいなくて大いに結構です。湯上がりに一杯いかがで？私もたまにはサービスくらいしますので。
Erica stood up, opened the refrigerator behind the counter, and put ice into the ice pail. This place is pretty, well suited. Oh, we were done with the chapter right there. No, I really like the guest house, honestly. And if everybody was smart in episode 3, we really could have survived a lot of events there. All right, what does this chapter have in store for us? It's not quite midnight. The day has not yet turned over. And based on the chapter title and where we currently are, I have an idea of what's going to happen here.
最近の若い子とはどうも相性が良くないよ。
ジョージさんだってお若いですよ。
いとこで最年長ということもあって、ついついいつも自分がもう若くないって気持ちになっちゃって。
George and Shannon could be seen standing in the rainy rose garden. Though the rain was still pouring down, there was hardly any wind at all. The scant protection provided by the arbor was more than enough to house the secret meeting between lovers. Following that fight with Erica, they had decided to play some cards for a change of pace. When that was over, Shannon had returned to the servant room, and shortly after that, George had left his room to meet with Shannon at the time they had arranged.
エリカさんくらいのお年の方が一番自分自身との付き合い方が難しいと思います。
そうだね。子供という殻を打ち破りたくて、あたり構わずくちばしを打ちつけるお年頃だね。それを打ち破れて、ようやく大きく羽ばたくことができる。僕もそうだったよ。かつてまだ殻の中にいた時の自分は情けなくひ弱な。
そんなことはありません。
いや、いいんだ。自分でも分かってる。かつての僕はいとこの中で最年長ではあっても、いつもぼんやりしているうだつの上がらない男だったよ。それは何もいとこの中だけの話じゃない。家でも学校でも全てでそうだったさ。
I hated being like that. I wanted to break that shell and become a splendid adult like mother and father.
でもジョージ様はそれを打ち破られました。この数年のジョージ様は毎年出会うたびに道があるようでした。
ありがとう。
何かきっかけがあったんですか？
殻を破る？
はい、あれほどのまるでさなぎを経て蝶になるかのように目まぐるしく成長されたジョージ様がただ漫然と日々を過ごしていて、それだけの大きな決意をされる 何かきっかけがあったに違いないと思いまして。
Oh, I wonder what it could have been. No, I mean, it doesn't matter. Well, I guess it does matter. It could be anything, you know. There has to be some sort of goal to break out of your shell that is holding you back as a person. You know, what is having you avoid, you know, being able to spread your wings, being able to push towards that, you know, success in adulthood, excuse me.
君に惚れて愛の力で成長したと僕は今まで言ってきたんだけど本当はもっとネガティブな感情から
Never mind, I'm wrong. George has something else going on here.
そんないつも明るく朗らかでおられるジョージさんにネガティブな感情なんてちょっと信じられないです。
僕はね、両親に女性は大切にしろと教えられてきたんだ。そしてそれを実践してきたつもりだったよ。
はい、とても紳士的で素晴らしいと思います。
That is a huge plus for a lot of women, you know, being a
本当は違
gentleman.
う。異性とどう接していけばいいかわからなくて、
Amen, brother.
過度に神格化して恐れて、紳士的なレディーファーストを装いながら、僕は女の子との交流に多分恐怖さえ覚えていた。
Amen, brother. Of course, George had wanted to be around girls as much as any healthy boy might. However, he didn't know how to interact with them. He wanted to act like a gentleman to avoid being disliked by them, treating them with care. Of those feelings, only the words "treat women with care" took precedence, blossoming into a subconscious fear of women. Oh, that's why my dogs are barking. The fireworks are still going on. Here in America, even so New Year's has already passed, you know, loud fireworks and big old booms is like, you know, that goes well with beer and, you know, patriotism and whatever else.
そんな男を
So it goes on for a while.
紳士的な奥手な男と呼ぶんだろうね。とんでもない、ただの臆病者さ。そのくせ自分はこんなにも紳士的なのにどうして彼女ができないのかと一方的に思い込み、最後には世間の女性は全て男を見る目がないなんて勝手に決めつけ、
Okay, George. Interesting.
これが本当の情けない男ってものさ。
How many years ago was it when I noticed? Probably when I was in middle school. At the time, I assumed I was obviously the most gentlemanly of the cousins, so I would obviously be popular with women. I mean, you can't really expect that sort of stuff, though. Even if you are being gentlemanly and nice and whatever else, it kind of defeats the purpose, and it shows you actually aren't really who you think you are. However, reality was very different. At school, I was pretty much completely hopeless. Far from being a leader, I was a typical bullied kid who got pushed around by everyone. At the time, I figured I was just a capable and adaptable man who could keep in perfect tune with his surroundings. How stupid. Sure, I might have gained some measure of trust from girls. However, not only was there no one who could become my girlfriend, there weren't any girls, or even any girls I could call friends.
そりゃそうさ。レディーファーストと称していつも後ろへ下がる男だよ。そんな後ろ向きな牽引力のない男の背中についていこうなんて誰が思うものか。滑稽だね。それに気づかず自分はさぞや魅力的な男子に違いないなんて思ってる。
その気持ちちょっぴりわかります。
Well, you know, there's a point where you gotta, like, step back and realize what it is you're doing. There's nothing attractive about a person who is willing to get walked on to try and treat a woman, you know, what they think nicely. Open the door for a woman? Absolutely. Open the door for other people in general, you really should. But to give up a whole lot in, you know, your life, let's say, to go a little overboard thinking that you're doing something that is gentlemanly, yeah, it could be seen as being walked on. It really does depend, but it does sound like George was probably going a little overboard with his attempt at being a gentleman.
自分が
I could be wrong.
異性に魅力的に見てもらいたくて努力した振る舞いが必ず思った通りの結果を導くとは限りませんから。
へえ、シャノンにもそういう経験が？
I will say, though, This does kind of remind me, like very barely, does it remind me of a Ray William Johnson AI TikTok story that he was sharing about, like, I guess some guy thought that he was extremely popular and attractive, but he had no, like, understanding of how to socialize with another person, let alone a woman. So he just got angry and, like, you know, took revenge upon them. But, like, that's not how it works. And I'm sure that's very far from George, but I do think people just have, like, the wrong idea as to how they're acting versus how they should be treated in a response.
もちろんです。私だって男の子の気を引きたくてできもしないお化粧をして恥をかいたり恥ずかしい失敗の思い出がたくさんあります。
そんなうぬぼれた僕の目を覚ましてくれたのがシャノン、いや君たちだった。
どんなきっかけがジョージさんに訪れたんですか？
Well, what do we got? What do we got here, George?
嫉妬かな。
意外です。
Yeah, that's a deadly sin.
でも何に？
君とバトラ君がとても楽しそうに話しているのを見て僕は嫉妬した。
私がバトラ様と？
Shannon raced through her memories trying to find a conversation that might have made George envious.
君たちにとっては他愛ない会話だったに違いないよ。でも僕はそれに嫉妬を感じてしまった。ここからの話はバトラ君には絶対に内緒にしてほしい。約束できる？
もちろんです。
みすぼらしい僕の懺悔さ。でも聞いてほしい。今夜は僕の悪い部分も知ってくれた上で君に返事をもらいたいことがあるから。
はい、聞かせてください。
With a smile but a serious look in her eyes, Shannon nodded. Tonight. She knew what he was going to ask her tonight. We all know what he's going to ask her tonight. George had the right to confess before asking that sacred question, and Shannon had the obligation to listen. Shannon understood this, so she listened quietly.
感激の魔女ってずいぶん趣味の悪い魔女なのね。
Yes.
恋を語る話は時を超えて尊い。いくら聞いても飽きぬでな。もっとも私にはエンジェの乙女らしい嫌悪の表情の方が愉快であるわ。
Featherine laughed quietly. Ange huffed and looked away. But she quickly realized that this would only entertain Featherine even more, so she tried to act unconcerned.
バトラ君もジェシカちゃん
There
も
was like no point
昔
to
から
that.
快活だね。いや、そんな言い方は取り繕ってる。だからこう言うよ。
Overly friendly? George looked up where the moon should be, high above the rain clouds, and spoke. They were honest words spoken simply from George's heart.
僕は昔からバトラ君もジェシカちゃんも礼儀に欠けた子だと思ってたよ。いや、もっとダイレクトに言おう。言葉遣いの下品な子たちだなとさえ思っ本当さ。軽蔑してくれていい。
No, I think he's actually totally in the right for having this opinion. Because you look at everybody else, you look at their, you know, background here with this family, they really all should be very well-mannered. They really should be. However, Jessica's very tomboyish, which is okay. However, you know, her parents and other family members will probably highly disagree. And Battler went off to be, you know, doing his own thing for a while, so he kind of stepped away from the Ushiromiya name. But even before that, it does sound like he was pretty much the same as always, just a goofy kid. And you could argue that he probably got a lot of that from Rudolph. Hard to say.
しません。人は何を胸中に思おうと許されます。むしろ態度に出さなかったジョージさんは立派です。
ありがとう。僕はそんな彼らを内心に、それに比べて僕はなんと立派で紳士的魅力にあふれているかと本気でうぬぼれていたさ。
I was at that age where having a girlfriend felt like a necessary condition for becoming a real man. I truly believe that no girl could fail to admire a gentleman who treated girls as well as I did. So I really did assume that girls I knew were attracted to me.
それに比べたらいつまでもはしゃいだりふざけたり下品で低俗な言葉遣いばかりしているバトラ君やジェシカちゃんなんか絶対に彼女や彼氏ができたりするもんかと思っていたよ。それがいつまで経っても彼女ができない自分への精神安定剤だったのかもしれない。とんでもない。彼らは僕に劣ってなんかいない。むしろ異性を勝手に神格化してレディーファーストと称して恐れて避ける僕の方がよっぽど劣っていた。
バトラもジェシカも昔からああいう性分だった。確かにそやで紳士的淑女的とは到底言えなかっただろう。しかし男女を分け隔てなく交流できる力があった。いや魅力と言っていいかもしれない。
ちょっとわかるわ。お兄ちゃんやジェシカお姉ちゃんみたいなタイプの人って男女問わず誰とでも仲良くなれるタイプよね。ジョージお兄ちゃんには悪いけど、あまり紳士を振りかざしすぎる人ってちょっと気持ち悪いわ。女に幻想を持ちすぎっていうか、なんというか。
No, you know what? I think she's on the right track here. So for me, I'm gonna try and like open up my my walls a little bit here and or my doors or whatever and let you guys know a little bit about me. Am I nice to people regardless? Yeah, you know, I try to have that, you know, that gentlemanly sense. I'm not necessarily going to go out of my way to have everybody walk over me just because I'm trying to be nice. But besides that, I still, you know, step out of my professionalism sort of area and will, you know, kind of goof off with people of whatever sex. And, you know, just it depends on the time and the place, what the relationship is with the person, how well I know them. And I just be myself. Because if I'm always acting like I've got to stick up my ass, then no one's really going to want to talk with me, you know? You know, I always joke here and there, and I even did in this video about this and that, but I think that's how people should act, is they should definitely act with professionalism, kindness, have the gentlemanly charm, or the ladylike charm, you know, whatever you are, depending on the situation and who it is that you're talking to and what the situation calls for. But in other situations, you got to be able to let loose. You got to be able to allow yourself to be yourself, because if you always act in that professional type of way, there's not going to be a whole lot of people that want to be around you because they want to let their guards down. They want to just, you know, be themselves as well, but they wouldn't be able to if you're not either, if that makes any sense. So it seems like George wasn't able to act like himself. He was always having to be a gentleman. He never really had the personality or whatever that he wanted to put on display otherwise. Or he developed one that just wasn't really one that people liked.
人は無縁であるなら、相手が無害で
Except for family, that
退
is.
屈な人間であることを尊ぶ。しかしそれは邪魔にならないという意味で好まれているだけだ。退屈な人間を身近にしたいと願う人
See,
間
there
な
it
ど
is.
いるわけもない。
当然よ。動かず物も言わぬ電信柱と友達になろうというバカはいないわ。
Yes.
でも動かず物を言わないのは電信柱としては優秀だわ。
そういうことだ。ジョージはつまり、いくら自分が優秀であっても魅力ある人間として認められていない。ただの電信柱扱いであることにようやく気づいたというわけだ。
Okay, so I do think we're all on the same
僕
page
は
here.
当時
Maybe.
うぬぼれの真っ盛りだった。だから親族会議でみんなで集まっている時、一番魅力的なのは僕で、それに混じって遊んでくれた使用人の女の子はみんな。それがあの日、僕はそこでようやく自分がどれほどみすぼらしかったかを思い知ったのさ。
私が当時何か心ないことを言ってしまったのでしょうか。
いいや、逆さ。君は何も言わなかった。君の瞳に映っているのは常に僕だといううぬぼれが打ち砕かれたのさ。
Just when did it start? No, it must have started long before then. I only failed to notice because my eyes were clouded with conceit.
ある日唐突に気づいたんだ。君たちがバトラ君やジェシカちゃんと僕なんかよりはるかによく馴染んで楽しそうに遊んでいることに。
Yes, those two, whom I'd looked down upon so much, were radiating far more charm than I was. Excuse me, you really looked like you were enjoying yourself that day. The look on your face was far brighter than any you have ever showed me.
気色悪い話さ。僕は君を勝手にひょっとしたら異性の付き合いになってもいいかななんて、それを勝手に恋人を奪われた気持ちになって勝手に傷ついて、どこまでも僕はダメな男だったんだ。その時ようやく僕は自分の愚かさに気づけたんだ。
ジョージ様。
その後バトラ君はいろいろあって親族会議に来なくなったけど、ルドルフおじさんから彼の近況は聞いていたよ。おじさんも可愛い人だね。
That he is.
バトラ君とあんなにいつも喧嘩をしているのに、バトラ君の近況を常に気にかけていた。
そうですね。私も聞かせてもらったことがあります。アスム様も呆れておられましたっけ。学校では大層女性に人気で、トラブルが絶えないのはきっとルドルフ様の血のせいに違いないと。
そしてジェシカちゃんも男女の友達を大勢作っていつもその中心で活躍していると聞いていたし、
I mean, we even saw a glance of that back in episode 2.
実際ジェシカちゃんと話してもそれは何の誇張でもないと理解できたよ。
I mean, come on, only a popular person would get up on stage and sing a copyright song, or a copyrighted song that would therefore be replaced with something that was not copyright protected. And this proved that the two I'd looked down upon were much more attractive human beings than I was.
最初はね、バカッケーな話さ。ふざけたりはしゃいだり下品な会話を好めば彼らのような魅力が得られると思い込んだ。
ジョージ様がですか。ちょっと想像できません。
痛々しかったよ。僕もあの頃のことは生涯思い出したくない。そしてそんなことを真似ても真の魅力は宿らないと。僕に魅力がないのは人を大事にすると称したり、場の雰囲気に合わせて振る舞えると称したりして、いつも一歩逃げている自分の臆病さ。僕はそれを克服するために生まれ変わる決意をしたよ。初めて自分の殻というものを理解し、それを打ち破ろうと誓ったんだ。
Okay.
その意志がくじけそうになるたびにあの日のことを思い出して、君たちが僕を忘れて楽しそうに遊んでいたあの日、そして僕に好意があると決めつけている君の瞳に僕が映っていなかったことをね。誓ったんだよ。今度こそ本当に君を振り向かせてその瞳に僕を映してやりたいとね。それが実は君に恋をした
複雑だったんですね。
あの日僕を無視して遊んでいた君たち、いや君への復讐がいつの間にか本当の恋心に変わっていったんだ。しかし神に誓うよ。それが君のことを真剣に考え出したきっかけだとしても、僕が今君に持つ気持ちには何の偽りもない。僕は君を生涯愛することを誓う。それは誰にも何にも偽らない。そして君を妻として迎えるために僕には世界を敵に回すことだって厭わない覚悟がある。
My man.
ジョージさん。
以上が君に先にしておきたい懺悔さ。僕は今日まで君のことを初恋で一目惚れだったと言ってきた。それは嘘なんだ。うぬぼれた僕の歪んだ。
関係ないです。
Shannon smiled. but she spoke forcefully enough to cut through George's words.
初恋じゃなかったら結ばれちゃいけないんですか？初恋の人を忘れたらそれは裏切りなんですか？恋ってそんな単純じゃない。いえ、単純かもしれない。だって恋なんて簡単。常に今の自分の正直な気持ちだけが正解なのだから。だから昔の話も馴れ初めも何も関係ないんです。
懺悔し損だったかな。
No, I think that's actually also like a rite of passage in a way. Because you've, escaped from this shell that you've described of yourself, you're able to be completely honest about it with somebody that you love. I think that's like a final step to show that you truly have grown as a person.
いいえ、何事も完璧なジョージさんにも人間臭い一面があることが分かってちょっと嬉しかったです。
There's also that, which is always good too.
そしてそれを私だけに打ち明けてくれることに。
ありがとう。僕は君がいたから僕になれた。
私もジョージさんがいるから私でいるのです。だから包み隠さず教えてください。私たちはどんな夫婦になってどんな未来を築くのですか？
僕は君という妻を得て父さんを超える実業家になる。そして様々な挑戦や冒険を経て自分の可能性の限界を確かめたい。その到達点の頂に君と一緒に至りたいんだ。そこからの眺めは僕以外の誰にも見せられないものになる。
楽しそうです。どこまでもお供します。
もちろん実業家としての冒険だけじゃない。夫婦でしか築けないものもたくさん積み上げていきたい。
Oh, like a cool household like environment? You can only do that as a couple. You can't do that by yourself. It just seems so lonely if you try to do it by yourself.
それはどんなものですか？
Nope, that's all I can think of is a cool household environment.
子供を作ろう。
Obviously, I'm joking, guys. I mean, come on.
はい、旦那様。
Oh, come on, guys. Stop with this.
最低3人は作りたい。
Yo, George, that's crazy.
男の子も女の子も両方欲しい。
もし3人とも男の子だったら？
You have to kill one of them.
次こそ女の子かもね。
Oh, I guess that's a safer, direction, I
4
think.
人目を作ろう。何人いてもいい。子育てという冒険も2人で楽しもう。
Yeah, it kind of does matter on how many.
そしてやがては巣立った子供たちが孫を連れて帰ってくる。気づけば僕たちは大勢の子供と孫に囲まれた賑やかな老後を迎えてるだろうね。
楽しそうです。ジョージさん、どんなおじいちゃんになってるんでしょうね。
You guys are so many steps ahead here. Let's slow it down.
君こそどんなおばあちゃんになってるんだろうね。でも僕は君を変わらず愛し続けるよ。そして大勢の家族に見守られながら王女をできたら僕たちの人生は誰にも負けないものとして描き切られる。
George didn't just talk about his love of the present. He swore to love her soul until the final moment, when the lid of their coffins would be shut. Then George took a small box out of his pocket. Even without opening it, she knew what was inside. He took it out with a motion that was even more natural than the one he'd practiced in the airport bathroom. I forgot about that. And it was overflowing with masculine charm.
さよ。
Oh man, I forgot the true names, which I don't know if we learned for the first time about Kanuns, which I've already forgotten at this point since it's been a while since I recorded that video, but yeah, that was also brought up and shared with Jessica.
結婚しよう。
はい。
この指輪をどうかその指に通してほしい。
はい。ジョージさん。
That ring, which glistened divinely, even in the dim light of the arbor, passed from George's hand to Shanun's finger. Of course, Shanun had already decided which finger to put it on.
僕と君の未来を阻もうとする全ての運命に、僕は毅然と立ち向かうことを誓う。
George proclaimed that he would reveal their engagement to the entire family on the next day.
僕たちの結婚に両親はとやかく言うかもしれない。
No, they 100% will.
でも僕はそれを許さない。僕が親にするのは婚約の報告であって、もし母さんが君との結婚を許さないと言い出すなら、僕は自ら感動を申し出て君と家を出るつもりだよ。僕にはその覚悟がとっくにあるんだ。
Mentally or financially, or both.
僕たちの未来を
If it's
阻
both,
む
that's
全ての
really
運
good.
命に、僕は毅然と立ち向かうことを。
George had said it aloud, so Shanun said the same thing.
私も私とジョージさんの未来を阻もうとする運命に毅然と立ち向かうことを誓います。
Also, I just want to throw this out, not as as an excuse. Hold on, Erica. Not as an excuse, but it would just make me feel better. I'm like a little sick, so like my fumbles this time around, I want to say have like, well, it's beginning to sound like an excuse, but yeah, I'm feeling a little unwell. But I also just don't have my glasses on, but I don't think that would have created the problem. Let's just go with I suck.
バトラさん、いつ事件が始まるんです？
We're building up to it, Erica.
もう恋愛ごっこお腹いっぱいなんですけど。
黙って見ていろ。
はいはい。私があくびでもした隙に何かとんでもない伏線を通過されたらたまりませんから。
お前には愛はないのか。
Remember, without love.
愛が証拠として受理されるミステリーってあるんですか？ありませんから。
Erica laughed coldly and stared down at the two on the game board. Battler watched her quietly. Erica thought that she felt a touch of pity in his gaze, and she averted her eyes uncomfortably.
一応理解はしてますとも。愛が殺人の動機程度にはなりうることくらい。
It really can. I mean, I think there's maybe not a whole lot of justification, but there could be, some motive enough for Shanun to want to like take revenge against maybe some members of the family or maybe some of the staff. I don't know about George necessarily, but maybe he feels that there's some unfairness of sorts. In a very similar way that greed seems to push, the parents to all want to, get this thing over with, and maybe one of them is a little twisted in the head and therefore they have some other ideas and shit. Envy seems to be the deal here with George. There's jealousy, and that will lead to other deadly sins of sorts. So yeah, I want to say that could be what pushes some of these characters here, even the ones that don't really stand out as having a possible motive to maybe committing some of these crimes. Shit, even Kumasawa could actually have a little bit of a spotlight on her.
一応この東屋での出来事は2人の婚約に障害が生じた場合、犯行の動機となりうる程度には解釈しとこうと思います。
And this wouldn't necessarily be the first time either, because in a previous episode we had shoot, what's her name? Ava. We had Ava like literally tell Shanun, hey, you're dog shit, and you'll never have like a son like mine as your husband or whatever, or whatever she said. She was really fucked up for saying it.
まあ、赤くない言葉でいくら愛をささやこうとも全ては幻ですが。
かわいそうにな。お前は魔女に証拠が与えられなかったら。
くだらない恋愛トークはやめてください。私はあんたの敵であって、恋の話に付き合う酔狂な友人ではありませんから。私には今のあんたがさっぱりわかりません。一体あんたは何を悟ったってんです？あんたとベアとは罵り合い殺し合う関係だったはず。そのあんたが 何の真相に至ってベアトに対する感情を変えたんですか？まさか殺し合うライバル関係から恋愛感情が芽生えたとかバカなこと言い出さないですよね。
Well, I want to say that there's always been like a love story of some sort in each of these episodes. Obviously, we have George and Shannon as like a main point of that. We see it especially in episode 2, a little bit in episode 4 even. In episode 1, it was also there as like the big surprise to like, you know, all of us jumping into Umineko for the first time and then that shit getting ripped up by the first set of deaths. So there's always been that. And then there's also Kanun and Jessica. That was also a little bit in episodes 2 and 4.
エリカ卿、ゲームの進行を続けさせましょう。退屈な恋愛シーンなどとっとと終わらせるに限ります。
ほんとそうですね。口を挟んで失礼。ささ、どうぞ続きを。
So basically, like, we need to understand that love is necessary in this story. For what sense? I don't know, but we need to fully take it in. Erica wanting things to get moved along, we don't want that. We need to be able to observe all of these scenes for whatever it is they're trying to tell us. Even if it's the most mundane shit, we gotta take it in. Because without love, it cannot be seen. Whatever it is, if it's the answer, if it's the truth, if it's like the pathway to the truth, whatever.
シャノンです。戻りました。
うん、今日の日誌はまだだな。
はい、すぐに提出します。カノン君、留守番をありがとう。
長い休み時間だったね。
Kanun had already noticed. There was a silvery glint coming from the ring finger on Shanun's left hand.
では、私は先に休む。何かあったら構わず起こすように。
God damn, I hope Genji gets to be alive in this one. I missed Genji so much in the last episode.
おやすみなさいませ、源氏様。
Genji disappeared off to the waiting room. After that, only Shanun and Kanun remained.
時間をくれてありがとう。あとは私が控えてるから、カノン君ももう休んでもいいよ。
今度は僕の手番ってことだね。
悪いけど、私たちは負けないよ。
僕だって負けるものか。
今日まで臆病でお嬢様にリードしてもらわなければ何もできなかった君が。
姉さんが教えてくれたはずだよ。
何を教えたかな。
恋に昔も過去も関係ない、今だけが重要なんだって。もしそれが本当なら、僕の今は姉さんの今に何も負けてるなんて思わない。
Shanun and Kanun glared at each other with serious eyes. That period of tension vanished when Shanun chuckled.
それでいいよ。君とお嬢様も頑張って。もしも結ばれるなら、私たちが心の底から祝福できるくらいに素敵な関係になって。
姉さんにかなりのリードを許してるけどね。
Ain't that the truth?
仕方ないよ。それが君のこれまでの臆病の対価なんだから。
分かってる。それが僕の罪だから。
Shanun and Kanun fished around in their pockets and drew out two small things that glittered gold. They looked like the left and right wings of a gold butterfly.
私たちは家具、人間になって愛を育む奇跡を得るには、もう一度魔法の奇跡を頼らなくてはならない。
あいつのブローチが役に立つなんて。
私たちの手元にある。
It was the golden butterfly brooch, which Beatrice had once given to Shanun in the hopes of creating love between her and George. So we're bringing that back from episode 2. Shanun then gave it to Kanun, but he let his emotions get a hold of him and crushed it into pieces. So when the two wings they held were brought together, it would regain the form of a beautiful butterfly.
じゃあ、行ってくる。
Okay, so I was thinking about that actually a little earlier on when George was having his whole explanation about how he, you know, grew into a man out of his shell and whatever. What if that transformation of himself, which coincides with this supposed, like, magic miracle that Beatrice brought up to Shannon, what if that was just, you know, coincidentally lined up with George trying to break out of his shell and become a better person or whatever? You know, it just all kind of lined up. So, hard to say if anything's really going to necessarily come directly out of this this brooch, but, you know, who's to say?
僕もトランプに一応呼ばれてたからね。
うん、頑張ってね、お嬢様。きっと喜ぶと思う。
少し照れるな。
楽しんで、その感情を。
Kanun left the servant room. He went to go see Jessica and tell her what he had determined to do. Shannon quietly watched him go. A fragment of the brooch and the engagement ring let off a gold and silver glint.
懐かしいぞ。あれは確かにわらわがシャノンに与えたもの。カノンが踏みつぶして以来、どこへ紛失したかと思っていたら、まだ持っていたのか。
黄金蝶のブローチ、恋愛を助ける魔法のブローチとフェザリーヌさんの本で読みました。
That had been the first time that Beatrice, Witch of the Forest, had interacted with a human and given them her power. Bit by bit, she had transformed from a mere ghost to the ruler of the mansion at night. And by making the servants believe in her, she had wiped away the anti-magic power. And then it eventually became possible for her to appear openly in front of Shannon, whose magic resistance had grown particularly low, and who had begun to believe in the existence of Beatrice. To Beato, who had been unable to interact with anyone for many years, this conversation with Shannon must have been especially fun.
だから気前よく黄金蝶のブローチを与えてやったのだ。わらわは相当上機嫌であったのだな。わらわのごとき冷酷な魔女がそこまでサービスをするとは。
でも素敵です。あなたは未来の恋人たちの仲を取り持たれたのですから。
もちろん甘やかしたつもりはないぞ。わらわの魔力を抑えつけてきたあの肉々しい霊境を割ることと引き換えだ。そのおかげでわらわは一気に力を取り戻すことができたのだから。
That definitely, you know, raises some eyebrows around Shannon as well.
紫の雷が鎮守の社を打ち砕いたのです。島々の者たちは協調だとささやき合いました。
I am glad that we are revisiting this point, though.
今思えば、あれこそがベアトリーチェ様復活の印だったに違いありません。
Kumasawa had the rest of the night off, so she had let Erika talk her into drinking a bit, and was chatting about the legend of Akujiya Kishima and Beatrice in a happy, tipsy mood. Erika would nod from time to time, but besides this, she listened in complete silence. She wasn't actually taking notes, but she was gathering information on the whiteboard inside her head. Then she frowned as though noticing something out of place and held up her hand.
ちょっとストップを。
はい。
その鎮守の社は悪食島の悪霊を封じるために旅の修験者が建立した。
Yeah, the purpose was completely different compared to, you know, holding up Beatrice's power or whatever.
そうでしたね。
そうでございます。強い神通力をお持ちだったということで、その力を鏡に込め、
霊境として社に奉納し、悪霊を封印した。少し違和感を覚えます。悪食島の悪霊を封印する社がどうしてベアトリーチェも封印するんです？
And again, that was brought up in episode 2, but yeah, it is a good question to ask. I think like the explanation we got back then was that she just, you know, she was in the range, you know, like it was what's the term for it? When you get involved in like the crossfire of something, you know, it just was happenstance. Or it was just, you know, it was coincidental. No, that's not what I'm looking for either. I don't know what word I'm looking for to try to explain it, but it helps fit the narrative, I guess you could say.
それはその霊境の神通力が
なるほど。東洋の悪霊も西洋の魔女も
I guess it is
オッケーの
convenience, fuck it.
便利な霊境だったからというわけですか。わかりました。すっきりはしませんが、そこは折れることにしましょう。しかし、どうしてベアトリーチェが蜘蛛の巣も嫌うのかわかりません。
Shit, I can't stand spider webs either. According to the legend, the evil spirits of Akujikishima despise spider webs, and they were apparently used as wards against evil in the surrounding islands. In fact, spiders are a useful bug. There's nothing strange about the fact that island farmers had treasured them. It's very possible that they were then tied to the story of evil spirits and became known as charms against evil, leading to a tradition of people treating this useful bug with care through the generations.
しかしそれ、悪食島伝説の話です。そもそもベアトリーチェの魔女伝説の発祥は、この島に引っ越してきた後宮金蔵がミステリアスな黄金伝説とそれを授けた魔女という名の愛人を吹聴してから始まったものです。つまり悪食島の悪霊と黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェは本来全く異なる存在のはずなんです。なのに設定が同じになっています。
さてはて
The evil spirits of Akujikishima, god damn, that is a tongue twister to me, couldn't stand spider webs. So neither could Beatrice. And that sort of reasoning has been applied all over the place. When it was pointed out that this was strange, Kumasawa was lost for an answer.
金蔵さんの書斎のドアノブはサソリの魔法陣が描かれていて、それは西洋魔術では魔除けを意味する。だから西洋魔女のベアトリーチェはドアノブに触れられない。これは理解できるんです。でも蜘蛛の巣に限ってはベアトリーチェが嫌う理由がありません。私の知る限りでも西洋魔女の苦手なものにむしろ蜘蛛は魔女の仲間や眷属では
Okay, so two things. One, this is like the only episode that spider webs actually get brought up as like an ick to Beatrice. And two, the whole deal with the doorknob, right? You know, charms being used and everything, that was all the way back in episode 1. Yet at the very end, when they were holed up in Kinzo's study, whoever or whatever got a letter in there, you know, they bypassed that whole charm protection on the doorknob. That was completely disregarded. It really shouldn't have been. Doesn't that also, you know, push to, you know, this whole idea that somebody in there must have left that letter there?
思うに悪食島伝説の悪霊と魔女伝説のベアトリーチェ、この2つの異なる伝説が少し混交しているように思います。いいえ、混交どころか融合かもしれません。悪食島伝説はロッケン島周辺の暗礁を恐れた漁民たちが生み出したおとぎ話。しかし悪食島に住まう悪霊なる者には具体的なビジュアルイメージが伴っていませんでした。人なのか怪物なのか、はたまた足のない幽霊なのか、さっぱりイメージがありません。人はビジュアルを伴わない空想を苦手とします。そこにベアトリーチェという魔女の伝説が登場した。悪霊よりは魔女の方が想像しやすい存在です。しかもその上、金蔵さんはベアトリーチェの肖像画を描かせ掲示しました。つまり悪食島伝説の一番の弱点、たたる悪霊のビジュアルイメージが初めて保管されたわけです。そこからいつの間にか2つの伝説が混じり合っていってしまったのではないでしょうか。
A fair hypothesis, if I do say so myself, actually.
どうでございましょうね。この老いぼれには少し難しい話にございます。
The thing is, Kumasawa is always like, it's like she's always enjoying spreading stories and shit from like things that she's picked up over the course of her many years out here doing this work and whatever else, which is all fine and dandy, and I don't think you have to like take that into too serious of consideration of anything. However, it does seem like she can meld some things together a little bit too much. And then maybe we just take that a little too seriously in the storytelling. Kumasawa laughed to smooth it over, wiping away a cold sweat. She might have seemed confused, but she actually did understand what Erika was saying. In truth, she had been vaguely aware of how the legend of Akujikishima, which had been around before Ushiromiya Kinzo had come to Rokkenjima, and the legend of the Golden Witch, the story of the woman who had given Kinzo a vast quantity of gold, had both transformed. She didn't want to acknowledge it, but she knew. The setting where Beatrice hated the spirit mirror and spiderwebs, and this had been based on the ancient legend of Akujikishima. The evil spirits part of the legend had just been replaced by the witch of the portrait.
もし黄金の魔女ベアトリーチェを自称する人物がいたとして、彼女が本当に蜘蛛の巣を嫌うのかどうか、ぜひ聞いてみたいものです。触れるとどうなるんでしたっけ？
魔女の眷属は蜘蛛の巣に触れるとやけどを負うそうですから、多分そうなるんじゃないかと。
いいじゃないですか。それ見事な魔女裁判です。蜘蛛の巣に触れてやけどするならば、それは悪霊の方であって魔女ではない。そして触れても何も起こらないのであれば、ただの人間であることの証。つまりやけどしようがしなかろうが、黄金の魔女など存在しないという証になります。魔女伝説なんて所詮悪食島伝説が装いを変えただけの焼き直しに過ぎないのです。
Well, we also have to remember the explanation we recently got with spiderwebs is that because Beatrice can turn into a butterfly, butterflies can get caught in spiderwebs. And that could just be like an unfortunate, downside to, being the Golden Witch Beatrice that just so happens to transform into a butterfly of all things.
ただ伝説がそこにあるだけで、フルドエリカはこの程度の推理が可能です。いかがです、皆様方？
Though only the two of them were in the lounge, Erika faced in the direction of an invisible audience, or where an invisible audience would have been, and shrugged. And just as Erika imagined, the targets of her comments actually were there listening in.
蜘蛛の巣ですか？触れるとやけどを？
When Beato the Elder snapped her fingers, a graceful silver spider slipped down from the ceiling hanging by a transparent thread. Afterwards, only a single silver strand remained. Timidly, Beato stretched her finger out toward the spider's string. Then she touched it.
平気です。
平気なのか？
Beato the Elder lifted up a white pale finger, and after showing it to her little sister, she traced the silver string with it. There was a stench like a single hair being burnt. Once again, she held her finger up in front of Beato, who was stunned. There was a thin burn line, as though someone had traced across it with a razor.
これはどういうことですか？
わらわが聞きたい。どうしてそなたは平気なのか？
わかりません。むしろ逆に、どうしてお姉様が蜘蛛の巣に触れるとやけどをするのかわからぬ。
It's like the elder Beatrice is more of an evil spirit here on the island, and the Beatrice that we know here that has been recreated by Battler is more of just a witch. So, it's kind of like what Erika was bringing up earlier, with sort of like the melding of the two ideas, the evil spirits of Akujikishima and the witch sort of getting melded together. And maybe that's what Beatrice the Elder has become. While Beatrice over here on the right, the younger one, is just, more of just like a witch that has not been necessarily tainted by Rokkenjima or anything here.
わらわが自らの存在を意識した時から、そういうことになっていた。
では、お姉様は
Beato hesitated. However, her question was clear.
違う。わらわは悪食島の悪霊などではない。 わらわはロッケン島の夜を支配する魔女。どうしてこの島の太古の悪霊と同じ弱点を持つのかは、わらわ
苦手なのは雲の巣だけですか？
エリカとやらが言うように、金蔵の書斎のドアノブもダメだ。あのサソリの魔法陣はわらわを焼く。わらわにとって金蔵の書斎の扉を開けようとするのは、真っ赤に焼けた蹄鉄を渦中に拾うも同じこと。
Yeah, I would like to imagine also in, or look back on episode 5, where Beatrice was 100% in that study so many times, supposedly, with Natsuhi, supposedly, with Kinzo, allegedly.
そなたはどうか？サソリの魔法陣ですか？
The older sister snapped her fingers again. When she did, the surrounding scene bent and twisted, and they had suddenly moved to the place in front of Kinzo's study. And there was the doorknob engraved with a scorpion magic circle.
魔術を研究するものならば、人的にも霊的にも隔絶された隠れ家が必須となる。金蔵が自らの書斎を閉ざし、このような魔除けを施したとしても不思議はない。そしてそれは困ったことに、わらわにもこうして効果がある。
She gently grasped the doorknob. As she did, a violent burning sound, unbelievably stronger than the one caused by the spider web, rang out.
お姉様、大丈夫ですか？手は。
Her hand had been horribly burnt, and Beato couldn't help but avert her eyes.
安心せよ。これしきすぐ治る。
Apparently, it would heal by itself if left alone. The older sister seemed to heal at an inhuman rate.
だがそなたはどうやら平気らしいな。
She timidly poked the doorknob. Nothing happened. Slowly, she touched it with her entire palm, but she felt nothing but a pleasantly cool sensation.
不思議だ。
The only thing I can think of here is that we have two different interpretations of Beatrice the Golden Witch here, which is interesting. And I think that's something that we need to, highly consider here, is that everybody tells their story, whether out of convenience or to scare others or whatever in terms of Beatrice here on this island. Maybe she's a scary witch that roams the forest to make sure that the kids never linger in there and, stay inside the house or whatever. Or Beatrice is used as a go-ahead for describing what may have happened for these murders that are about to occur here tonight and tomorrow. So we've got different interpretations of how Beatrice actually is. And that might be a huge clue going forward. Everybody views Beatrice differently. Because Beatrice doesn't exist, we know this. We know that there's other things actually going on here. But with this context here, this has to show that there's just different ways that Beatrice is portrayed.
逆にドアノブに触れても平気ですが、お姉様のような火傷を負ったら私は簡単には治らないと思います。
まるで普通の人間のようであるな。
No, it's like she actually is human. And like I said in the beginning of the episode, the younger Beatrice is more like the Beatrice that we met in episode 3 when Rosa found herself at the other mansion, the Kuidorian or whatever it's called.
はい、私自身自分が魔女だとはちょっと信じきれていません。私にはお姉様のように魔法を使うこともできないし、不思議な火傷も、そしてすぐに傷を治すこともできません。お父様は私を偉大なる魔女の生まれ変わりだと信じてくださいましたが、私にはそれが信じられなくて。
そなたは何者なのか。
私はベアトリーチェ。お父様のために生まれてきました。お姉様は？
わらわもまたベアトリーチェ。金蔵に魔法にて黄金を授け、その後も魂となって島に縛り付けられている 体を失った魔女である。
And then there's also that to
私
consider.
たちは一体何者なんでしょう。わらわと違い、そなたは体を持つ存在のように見える。
え、そうなんですか？
あのエリカとやらの話を聞いて、わらわはふと思った。魔女であり、魔法が使えるが体を持たぬわらわと、そして魔女であるが魔法は使えず肉の体を持つそなた。わらわたちはやがて一つになり、掛け合った部分を埋め合って、本当のベアトリーチェとして完成されるのではないだろうか。
That's what I'm predicting. It seemed to make sense. Both of the Beatrices were missing something. If they became one, they would surely be very close to the Beatrice that Battler desired.
試して見るか。手を出せ。
The older sister slowly raised her palm and held it out before Beato. The large burn from a second ago really had started to heal already.
わらわたちは一つになれるかもしれぬ。わらわも知りたい。そなたと一つになることで未来のわらわを知りたい。
Beato also raised her hand slowly, and the two hands touched. And nothing happened. Yep. Perhaps this meant that while they were fated to become one eventually, that time had not yet come.
わらわにとって雲の巣が苦手なのは当たり前なこと。しかしそなたはそれを知りもしなかった。同様にそなたは自分が生まれてきた理由をお父様のためだという。そのお父様というのはどうやら後宮バトラのことらしい。わらわも年に数度しか訪れぬ稀な客人である彼のことは知っているが、その稀な客人の彼とそなたというわらわにどのような接点があるのか理解できぬ。わらわたちは互いをもっと知るべきに違いない。
そうですね。私たちは互いを知り合うことで本当に大切なことに至れる気がします。
その向こうにいるのが一なる未来のベアトリーチェ。いや、それこそがわらわたちのあるべき正しい姿に違いない。
With their hands still joined, the two Beatrices swore to fill in the parts the other lacked and regain their single form. Bit by bit, Beato was walking down the path that led to the former Beatrice. Damn, we're finishing up chapters quickly here. That's 2 in 1 video, technically. I don't think that's a new record, because I think I've done the same shit before, where I accidentally ended a video off right before the end of a chapter, and yeah, we just finished it off in the beginning of another video. Okay, so we're obviously going to wrap it up here. But I did want to take a look at the character screen here, just real quick. I love that, you know, Battler is also just kind of here. Like, he's kind of squeezed in the middle of all this lovely shit. But going to the human side real quick, I just want to take a gander at something. So, obviously, there's 4 kids underneath good old Kinzo here. But the thing is, it does seem, we know that Beatrice existed as a person. We know that to be true, and that she was over at the Kuadorian. She was somewhere maybe around the same age as Rosa, or somewhere around there, maybe. But she was locked up there at that mansion. And the big question is, where did she come from? So the Beatrice that we have here, the younger one, that is saying that her father is Battler, I don't really know how I want to predict it, but let's say that's true. In some sort of way, there was a character named Battler, maybe even in Ushiromiya. Somebody underneath Kinzo, a son or whatever of Kinzo, gave birth to this character Beatrice, and Beatrice saw Kinzo as her grandfather. I'm trying to think back to the glimpse of the past in episode 3 that we got, and I might go reread that. I need to see if she referred to Kinzo as grandfather. Obviously, Virgilia was there. Unsure how we're supposed to, like, refer to her there. That could have been Kumasawa, actually. And we saw the two linked together in episode 3 as well. That could have just been a younger Kumasawa. So we might have some interesting links here, but Battler is an interesting case because the Battler we have here is not the Battler that has been referred to in other cases either. Episode 4, I think, was the one that pointed out that there was possibly maybe another Battler. I don't know. Just things to consider, things that linger in my old brain and whatever. But there we go. Chapter 7. Wow. Just making progress, guys. It's what it's all about. Thank you all for tuning into this one, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz. Pray to Beatrice for me, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.